Greetings from sunny Arizona. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I welcome you with all my heart. I see, Vladimir, that your wife came back to you. She only dumped you temporarily. Michael and Veselina look so happy. I wonder how long that'll last. EJ looks happy too. That won't last. Raju looks happy. That will last. He looks like a happy guy. And Jay sees my cat up here and says, yes, that's how it should be. I can't see Gypsy. I really, really love you all. You are my family, my spiritual family. There's absolutely no one left in the music of family anymore. That's a relative of mine. I outlived them all. Now, about you. What can I tell you about spirituality? What is the most helpful hint? Well, first of all, if you're an outward person, fully engaged in the world, and you see how rotten the world is, and that you want to get out of it because it's a miserable place, you have to learn to turn within. Turn your consciousness around and look within. It took me a while to do that. I was so used to having my attention outside. I couldn't see inside until I, in my imagination, turned my vision inward between my third eye and looked up like this. Close my eyes and imagine looking in about 1 inch with the third eye. That allowed me to, for the first time, turn my vision around. And look within into that subjective space inside of me. Because it feels like inside. You begin to feel your body. You feel your non-relaxed muscles in your back, shoulders, and neck. You feel your diaphragm going up and down. Your mind is going 1,000 miles per hour. Because usually it's going at least 1,000 miles per hour. But it no longer has things in the external world to hold its attention. So it sort of spins like a flywheel that's out of control. And you want to turn your vision inward. There's so many thoughts that keep distracting you from turning your vision inward. And you begin to recognize that the mind is your enemy. And you can't still your mind. You can't still your mind. So your mind becomes your preoccupation. You watch it, and you watch it, and you try to catch those moments between thoughts that Robert called the gap, so that you can rest in the gap and get to know what the gap is like. You try different techniques. like trying to watch yourself go to sleep and catch that moment that the gap comes before you go to sleep. I've never been able to do that in my life. On the other hand, other people try to catch themselves when they're first awake and to be in the gap knowingly. The gap where there's no objects, no thinking, no self has arisen at this point. It's just beingness, being alive, being aware without any objects of awareness yet. And then the mind comes. This you can learn how to do. Very helpful. It's very helpful. Then you can learn how to sit in meditation. The thing is, sitting in meditation by yourself really hardly ever produces the kind of intensity that you need to attain a silent mind. I found out that sitting in group, like with the Zen people, where you're kept absolutely still, no speaking, no communication with another, sitting strong in Padmasana or half lotus. It's very painful at first. It's painful in the knees, maybe the hips. It's definitely painful in your back. But after about 3 days of doing this, something happens. Suddenly, very, very suddenly, when you least expect it and the pain is most intense, all of a sudden it goes away. And you get into a state of locked balance, where you sit like a rock, like Gibraltar, majestic and powerful, with no pain left whatsoever. In fact, your attention gets so powerful that your body disappears altogether. Your mind drops, your attention drops from your mind, your head, sight awareness, into your body, where it becomes feeling awareness. And suddenly boundaries disappear between you and the world. The only sense that is working is hearing, because you don't feel your body anymore. There's no tension. It's absolute peace and absolute harmony and absolute balance. Your eyes are closed or just slightly open, looking at the floor. You can hear a pin drop in the whole zendo. Nobody makes a sound, not even of breathing. The wind is outside, blowing through 100-foot-high trees. You can hear the wind going in waves against the trees and against the paper windows. And suddenly, you become the wind, blowing through the trees. And you can feel yourselves traveling through the trees. In your mind's eye, you're going through the trees. And you hear a bird, crow calling. And in 2 instants, you are that crow in the tree, barking. Then a plane flies over. And now you're a 737 at 25,000 feet. You become one with the universe. There's no division between inside and outside anymore. There's just one vast emptiness filled with silence and the perception of emptiness, which is a visual phenomenon. But hearing, the movement of hearing is the only thing that's moving, and therefore you can perceive it with your ears. But nothing is moving in your body. No thoughts are present and moving. Just hearing. Sound of the bells in the distance. Maybe sounds from the highway below. Birds in the wind. You are all of this. You become one object at a time if you become anything. Or else you just sit in the emptiness, which includes everything in the whole of existence. You can't say that you're all of it. You can't say that you're none of it, because there's no you there. There's just these things happening. Yet your sense of being is still there, of existence. You know you exist, but there's no separation between you and anything else in the world. This is what most Advaitins call enlightenment. No separate self. All is one. Oneness is everything. There's no me. All of these things. But this is just a very, very tiny first step in the long road to complete awakening. That's an experience. But what do you make of the experience? You may think about this, which is real. The consciousness I attained in meditation, where there's only oneness and emptiness. Emptiness is everywhere and contains all objects, all experiences. Or is it ordinary mind, like when I come out of meditation and go to the dining hall to get something to eat, which is real? I asked myself that 10,000 times, because that many times I went into this oneness state, sitting with people very rigidly, very formally, with no speaking. Everything is guided by clackers and bells to know what to do. Never is a word spoken. The bells and the clackers tell everything, whether it's hit 1 time or 3 times or 10 times. It all has a meaning that you know intuitively without saying anything to yourself. And everybody springs into action or into meditation simultaneously without a word. After the 3rd day or 4th day of meditation during the retreat, your sitting is so powerful. You can feel the power in your body. It's called Joriki. It's so powerful you don't need to wear shoes outside anymore in the snow. You can walk in the snow for 10 minutes in Kinhin, round and round in circles, with ice under your feet. And you notice you don't feel the cold in the slightest bit. And you know how the Tibetans are able to go naked in the freezing snow in the Himalayan mountains. because you're doing the same thing now, except you don't take your clothes off. But you know that if you did, the cold would not affect you, it would not touch you. This is only the first step. There's no real understanding here. You're just experiencing the void. The void and oneness, they go together. In it, you begin to understand the Heart Sutra, where the Buddha, or the Buddha stand-in, says to Shariputra, form is not other than emptiness, emptiness not other than form. Feeling, thought, and consciousness are also like this. In the end, everything disappears into the void. Sounds, your own consciousness, mind, your body, and arises out of the void in the morning when you wake up. Gradually you learn to make the distinction between emptiness and the void, and nothingness, which is no perceptions whatsoever. I didn't make that connection until 5 or 6 years ago, I think, because often nothingness is used interchangeably with emptiness, and they are two different things. Emptiness and the void are experiences, both of the internal world and the external world, that they're essentially nothing but space. And objects come and go in that space. Nothing is permanent in that space, your own subjective space of consciousness, of beingness. And then nothingness comes at the end of the day when you go to sleep. Some say that they're conscious during sleep, but that's not true. During sleep, there's no mind to note that it's aware of anything. It's when they get up again the next morning that mind is there, and mind remembers what it was like to be asleep and the experience of nothingness. In nothingness, there is no experience because there is no mind. But you can remember nothingness and you can remember emptiness because they're both experiences. But without memory, they don't exist. When you're in deep sleep, there's no awareness of anything. And you're not even aware of not being aware of anything. This too happens in deeper meditation. It feels like you're going to go to sleep. Your brain gets heavy like a rock. Heavier and heavier. So heavy that no thoughts can penetrate it. It's like a rock. They just bounce off. You notice that the thoughts can't get more than 8 inches or 10 inches away from your brain. You never entertain them. It's like falling asleep into nothingness. Then all of a sudden, your brain drops into your chest and into your gut. And you're in that expansive state of oneness with the void. All these things you learn as experiences. But the meaning escapes people because it really has no meaning. You can only talk about it afterwards and create some sort of understanding of what it means. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Everything is one, no separate self. But none of this is true when you come back to everyday life. In everyday life, there's a you, there's a me, there are problems, responsibilities, emotions, things to be taken care of, people to take care of, cats to take care of, cats to pet, things to do. Then at the end of the day, you go back to meditation before you go to sleep, but you shouldn't meditate too soon before you go to sleep, or you won't be able to go to sleep. This is when real spirituality begins. You try to understand what all of your spiritual experiences meant. Do they mean anything? More importantly, do they mean anything to you in everyday life? Do they teach you anything about everyday life? Do they teach you that everyday life isn't real? That the world isn't real, your body isn't real, because they take those oneness states as more real than the everyday mind? Like Robert will say, you don't exist. The world is illusion. It's like a dream. You say to yourself, what does he mean by that? It's like a dream. Some say, and Robert said, it's because everything is impermanent. Everything changes. But does that make it unreal? A mountain can last 100 million years. But because it can go away and become impermanent, does that mean that the mountain's not real? For all intents and purposes, it's real. Just as Rolf is real. His body is real for 80 years, 90 years. Is love real just because it's temporary? One woman used to say to me all the time, we felt great love for each other. She used to say to me, Ed, is love real? I couldn't get the question. To me, it was a definite experience. So why would she ask whether it was real or not? Did it seem like an illusion to her? It seemed real to me. My breath seems real to me. My experience of emptiness seems real to me. But my experience of being awake, watching television, petting my cats, worrying about their health, worried about politics, all of these seem real to me too. Why should we say that everyday life is not real? Because we can attain experiences in meditation where they don't exist. Can't we say each is real in its own way, in its own time? Now, the truth is, people fool around with these philosophies of existence and religions, mostly because they're afraid of death or they're trying to escape suffering. If you're afraid of death, you want to have a philosophy where your spirit at least is immortal and it passes from one body to another body in a kind of infinite evolutionary chain where each new birth is a higher birth than before in terms of spiritual depth, understanding, kindness, etc. And you create all kinds of other concepts to support this, like karma. Whatever you do comes around. And that if you do good things long enough, your next birth will be much higher. You'll be born a Brahmin, or you'll be born as a Jesus. It's all fantasy. It's fantasy to support the idea that you don't die, that the body may die, but you don't die. Now, just because you want to live forever, does that mean that all your stories about living forever through rebirth are true? And that what we see in everyday life is only the surface? Do we wonder how Rolf can drink all that tea without having to go to the bathroom more often? We can speculate all that we want. We can be a Buddhist and believe in infinite rebirths, but with nothing that is reborn because there's no self. We can become a Hindu and believe in infinite births also, where you can actually regress and come back as a lesser being, or progress. We can have all kinds of ideas about how to progress, do good deeds, save all people from suffering, and things like that. Or we can look for a spiritual path to take us out of suffering and confusion and give us correct understanding and some sense of peace. This is what Robert does. He fills you with a beautiful lie to make you feel peaceful. That everything is preordained. You can't make any decisions. Sounds like Vesselina. Everything is preordained, Vesselina. It's already fixed in stone. So it doesn't matter what decision you make, it's been preordained. So toss a quarter. Call it heads or tails. Whatever comes up, do that instead of thinking about it. But from my point of view, it's not preordained at all, nor is there any such thing as free will. These are just concepts. Some concepts destroy other concepts. The concept of free will destroys the concept of preordained. Preordained destroys the concept of freedom. Which is true? Maybe neither. Maybe the world as it is can't be explained in words and concepts. Maybe the only thing to do is go through life without knowing what's true and what's false, what's good and bad, what's holy, what's not, what's enlightened, what isn't. Enlightened is one of the most misused words ever conceived. There are literally hundreds of definitions of what enlightenment means, and most of them disagree with each other. But we use the word enlightenment as if everybody knew what it means, and it means the same thing as I think it means, and I don't know what it means. But just the existence of the word enlightenment seems to imply that enlightenment exists somewhere, and somebody knows what it means. U.G. Krishnamurti says there's no such thing as enlightenment. Other people say you're already enlightened, just realize it. Others say you have to struggle through 10,000 incarnations to become enlightened. Which is true? Are they all true? Are they all false? Wei Neng said, the only truth that there is no truth. Beware even of this truth. So then, spiritual wisdom begins creeping in, and we learn to let go of all of our concepts. But rare is the person that's let go of all of their concepts. This was Sun Sansanim's entire teachings. Let go of all concepts and just respond to the situation you're in, sort of spontaneously. If someone asks you, what is the sound of one hand clapping? You ask him, are you comfortable there? Are you hot or cold? Do you want something to drink? Don't be taken in by his questioning. Don't be taken in by a Zen master that asks you a koan. He's trying to trap you into solving a problem that can't be solved except by escaping the problem. On the other hand, there are Zen masters that say there are 25,000 koans, and you have to solve every one of them before you know that you're complete with the koan system. They don't say you're enlightened, but you're complete with the koan system. And these koans cannot be answered the way Sun San Nim answers them, by giving you a cup of tea or hitting you with a stick or yelling katsu at you. That's only the first stage of emptiness. There are far more subtle koans, like Gute's finger. And a simple kats does not answer that at all. So what to do? I know all of you are thinkers. Some of you are leaving thinking, like Rolf. Angela's desperately trying to leave thinking. Stevie's left it to a degree. But thought is your enemy. You think you know. The only things that you really know about are things in the mundane world. And they're not true either. We think we know about chairs and houses, mortgages and loans, automobiles and traffic stop signs. But on that mundane level, yes, we do know, because we all speak the same language with common terms. We all use the term red the same, or black, or translucent, as it refers to processes and objects in the world. But when we turn the mind around and look within and begin to see consciousness and the inner workings of our minds, our hearts, emotions, the words no longer fit. And then when you go deep and deeper, and you begin to encounter the energies inside of yourself, there are so many systems which explain them. Kundalini, which is energy up the spine. Chi, which flows along meridians inside the body. Shakti, which is a generic term for the feeling of bliss. I like to say that all of these energies are the voice of God. They're not God itself. Your experiences of bliss are not God itself, but God speaking to you about a deeper reality within, the life force within, the light of consciousness within, the beating of your heart, the feeling of compassion, the feeling of fear, the feeling of pure beingness without an object, living in the void while sitting in an easy chair, no longer needing deep meditation to attain the void, sitting in nothingness, totally relaxed, feeling your body for any movement of tension anywhere within, and then relaxing it. Just letting your body drop away. And consciousness becomes so smooth, so pure, so welcoming. And the bliss is so refined that you can barely feel it. But because it's so refined, it's so exquisite. A new experience. Every week, you find new experiences of the Shakti. It's always changing. Sometimes it pervades the body. Sometimes you feel it outside the body. Sometimes both. Sometimes it acts like Kundalini. Sometimes like Chi. Sometimes you use it for healing. Sometimes you use it to try to influence events in the external world, and it always works to a certain extent. Sometimes to a minute extent. But your intention and the use of your own energies can change things, can change people, can change their minds, can change their bodies, heal their bodies, or cause injury to their bodies, like warlocks do with black magic. This is the world of imagination, where imagination turns into infinite worlds inside of yourself. Each world has its own denizens and own beings and so forth. But they're all mental creations, not unlike the external world. But now we get into philosophy again. And we can begin to say all other kinds of things that make us sound so intelligent and so brilliant, talking about infinity and infinite worlds and worlds within worlds and beings of energy and angels and demons. But for the person in the mundane world, none of this exists. For a person who is enlightened, none of these things exist. just a play of subjectivity, which are interesting to play with and to impact our everyday mundane world in different ways. But eventually, all of these things fall away. Even the bliss sometimes falls away, leaving us just quiet, rested, relaxed, welcoming, whole, truthful, honest, emotionally open. And then we learn that the world we thought we lived in, the mundane world, it's come really a world of horror, a world of mass shootings, destructive hurricanes, tornadoes, constant war. And this is reflected in the television we watch. Movies about cops and robbers, the justice system, invading aliens, death, destruction, earthquakes. People love catastrophe movies or alien invasion movies or zombie movies to terrify us and take us out of the mundane world for a bit into a world of even greater horror. But the mind is always trying to entertain us. That's why we elected Trump. He's not a president. He doesn't know how to act like a president or do presidential things. He's just playing a role for the cameras and for his poll numbers. Success for him is not success of the country, but his ratings. Total nincompoop. Yet half of our country follows him. It makes us worry about our country, doesn't it? In a very short period of time, I've told you all I know. Enlightenment is evasive because there are 10,000 definitions of enlightenment. The original Buddha's enlightenment, and all the Buddhas after him who have had different enlightenments. The enlightenment of Ramana, the enlightenment of Nisargadatta, Robert Adams, Ved Musica, all the other masters in the world that have lived and are living now. Papaji has a kind of low idea of enlightenment. Lakshmi thinks he's a successor for Ramana. And Robert said Ramana had no successors. It's all in the mind. Enlightenment is concepts in the mind. One man's enlightenment is folly for another man who says that first man is deluded. Some think enlightenment means that you're always smiling, you're always kind and gracious. But that's just being a good man, a gentleman. It has nothing to do with enlightenment. Other people who are enlightened are totally mad. They live naked in cemeteries in India, China, or in the forest totally alone. or in caves totally alone, never coming into civilization. Some are like madmen in civilization, and they can get put away because there they get 3 meals a day. They don't have to do anything. Robert said in one lecture, everybody thinks they're enlightened. Everybody that comes to me thinks they're enlightened. That's not true. But I think a lot of people did ask Robert, are they enlightened, and wanted confirmation. And he said, in fact, the number of really enlightened beings in the world can be counted on the fingers. He didn't say whether it's the fingers of one hand or 2 hands that I remember. But then again, that was his own definition of the term enlightenment, which would not be held by Papaji, which would not be held by Krishnamurti, definitely, or UG Krishnamurti, even more definitely. But the only thing I can tell you is to think as little as possible. And if anything, feel. Give up thinking for feeling. Adopt a cat or a dog. Love the cat and dog. Pet the cat. Feel the cat's life form in your hands and how she responds to your touch with a little meow, stretching out and relaxing more and more until she starts licking your head and she shows her love in return. This is such a different way of living. Live in feeling, Vladimir. It's not a matter of thinking or understanding. It's a matter of being emotionally open, physically open, and open to the energies, which means you have to learn how to be quiet, not think, and instead feel. Feel for within yourself what you find. You find emptiness, you find beingness, you find consciousness, you find consciousness without objects. You find a sense of self, your sense of presence. And you go even deeper and you go into nothingness. All these things are you. How can you say only some of them are you and not others are you? Sometimes you're a bird flying through the sky. Sometimes you're sitting in front of television watching a zombie movie, like I frequently do. Both being a bird and a viewer of zombie movies are me. Loving my cat is me. Worrying about my cat is me. Feeling so loved when Angela looks at me in a certain way. Feeling loved when I see Stevie's smiling face. Feeling so loved when I see Jay with Gypsy, or think of Jay with Gypsy. Or feeling so happy to hear Rolf talk about his experiences of joy and energy. And to hear Vasilina complain every day about something or other. And then to write, I feel joy today, I feel happy today. She's progressing nicely, bouncing around, but settling down. And there's Michael, blissfully on the other side of Vasilina, entering a 3-dimensional life from a 2-dimensional thought life. And Enrique, feeling the sweetness of enlightenment. And Michael T, feeling on the verge of great understanding. And Raju, I don't know what the hell Rachi's feeling. We should ask later. And then Spencer, always with the same look on his face, like, what the fuck is going on here? Why am I here? Well, it's interesting. It's the best thing I can do on Sunday morning at 11. I love you all. Let's have a question and answer session. Do you have any questions or any answers?
Hi, it's Michael T.
I can barely hear you, Michael.
I gotta get a little closer to the mic. Is the experience of the witness more predominant in the void or within Shakti, or neither, or every aspect? Because when you talk about the void, it seems to get really lonely in there. Does the encompassing of the witness eventually fill in the void as well?
Well, it's a complicated question. First of all, nothing is ever constant. So sometimes there's a deep feeling of I, experienced in various ways. The witness you cannot experience, you can only be the witness. That you realize, that's a concept, that's an understanding. You can only be the witness, can't experience the witness. And when you're in emptiness, sometimes you're aware of the self, sometimes you're aware of being separate, sometimes not. So it's not that there's one steady place that one is after one is enlightened, because enlightenment itself is a bullshit concept. Everybody has different experiences, and that's what you realize. One man's enlightenment is another man's delusion. Let them have that experience. I don't want to accept that or that understanding as enlightenment. I accept this as enlightenment. And I personally have no concepts to talk about enlightenment. It doesn't mean anything to me. It's words that other people use to explain what they think is the highest state of being, and everybody has a different concept. So it's never that simple that one takes predominance over another, or one is the dominating concept, or one is always there and one isn't. It's always changing. And it's so great that it's always changing because it's never boring. Whatever you want is there temporarily. Whichever way you want it, it's there temporarily. And then something else comes up. Don't try to understand it. You'll never get it by trying to understand. The only thing to understand is there's no truth. There's no universal truths about enlightenment or awakening or about the spiritual world, except that it's ever changing. And if you try to put it in a box, it won't fit.